My daughter-in-law forced a dirty mop into my hand in front of 8 guests, and my son called me a freeloader. They had no idea I was the primary investor in their house, and that I was about to call in the $440,000 loan they unknowingly signed. Before continuing, write where you are from or what time it is. My daughter-in-law, Tiffany, shoved the heavy, dripping mop handle into my hand, forcing the dirty wood against my palm. The betrayal was complete, public, and delivered in front of 8 of their snickering, entitled guests. I felt the cold, sour stench of the mop water hit my face like a physical blow. The lie that I was their cherished, ailing mother had just shattered. My hip was screaming, a deep, grinding pain that felt like metal shearing metal. For a year, that pain had been my quiet prison, but now it was a weapon used against me. Tiffany's face was a mask of cold contempt. "Don't just sit there," she snapped, her voice low and toxic. "You're not a guest." Every nerve ending screamed humiliation. I was Eleanor Vance, director of nursing for 40 years. I managed budgets larger than this house. And now I was being branded as the help, a scullery maid in front of a gallery of rich jellyfish who just watched in polite, suffocating silence. I turned toward the only person who could save me, my son. Marcus stood by the unlit fireplace, swirling a glass of whiskey, playing the part of the successful man of the house until the moment he was required to be a son. He was looking everywhere but at me, his shoulders tight, his jaw clenching. He was pretending the scene wasn't happening. "Marcus," I pleaded, my voice thin and trembling. It was the sound of a desperate mother calling for her child. "Please, son, stop this. Defend me." He winced, a tiny flicker of weakness, and Tiffany pounced. "Marcus, tell her!" she shrieked, the hostess facade completely gone. "Tell her we're not running a charity. Tell her to clean it up." He closed his eyes. He took a deep, shuddering breath, and when he opened them, he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Tiffany, desperate for her approval. The man who spoke next was a stranger. "Mom, Tiffany's right," he said, his words cold, sharp, and meant to cut. "You eat for free. You live here for free. Stop pretending you're sick and start cleaning." "You eat for free." The phrase echoed off the high ceilings, a toxin heavier than the red wine staining the beige carpet. In that single, brutal moment, Marcus invalidated 40 years of my life, my sacrifice, my struggle. He called me a liar, a faker, and a freeloader, all to protect his shallow, leveraged life. A click went off inside my head. It wasn't the sound of a heart breaking. It was the sound of a door shutting. The weeping mother vanished. The director returned. I was no longer a victim. I was an executive managing a hostile termination. I didn't scream or argue. I analyzed. Tiffany was insecure. The guests were irrelevant. Marcus was a failed investment, a bad asset, a total loss. The test was over, and I had my answer. I held the mop handle for one long, heavy second, allowing the silence to become a physical weight. Then, very slowly, I unclenched my fingers. The dirty mop fell to the polished hardwood floor, hitting with a wet, heavy, satisfying clatter. Tiffany shrieked, a short, strangled sound of pure shock. "How dare you? You cleaned that up!" she spat, her voice tight with disbelief. I didn't even look at her. I turned my back on the guests, on the stain, and on my son. I began to walk. The limp they had mocked for a year was suddenly gone, replaced by a steady, purposeful stride. I was walking to my office to sign the discharge papers. "Eleanor, you get back here!" Tiffany screamed, the sound echoing down the long marble hallway. I reached my small room, locked the door, and ignored the furious animalistic pounding that began seconds later. I went straight to the closet. Tucked away under my old nursing conference tote bag was the simple cherry wood box I'd bought 30 years ago. It held my most precious memories. And the only thing that mattered now, the stack of folded papers. They saw Eleanor the freeloader, a dependent widow with a bad hip. They saw a cost on their ledger. They forgot I was Eleanor Vance, the woman who had stared down surgeons with God complexes, written multi-million-dollar budgets, and understood contracts better than any realtor. I was not a freeloader. I was the silent primary investor in the hollow bankrupt corporation of their lives. And I was about to call in the loan. The first step was the go bag. I methodically packed my small, sensible overnight bag, 2 changes of clothes, passport, my late husband's ring, and the full prescription bottle of pain medication Tiffany hadn't found. A director of nursing knows contingency planning. I unlocked the wooden box. I pulled out the original notarized personal loan agreement and the canceled check for $400,000. I placed them, unfolded, in the center of the perfectly made queen-sized bed. It was a ceremonial, unmissable offering. The box was the only thing I was leaving behind. Then I unlocked the door. The pounding had stopped. I could hear their miserable voices in the living room. The party was over, and the frantic scrubbing had begun. Tiffany's low, sobbing, angry whisper filled the air. "This is your fault, Marcus. You and your stupid mother." I walked down the hall and stood in the doorway of the living room, watching them. The happy couple was on their hands and knees, side by side, scrubbing furiously at a vast pinkish-purple smear. They were in a sea of chemical foam and desperation. They were the help now, trapped in the cage they had built with my money. They were so consumed by the ruined carpet, the status symbol, that they didn't even see me. I walked right past them, through the foyer, and opened the heavy front door. I stepped out into the cool, clean night air and pulled the door shut gently behind me. I didn't slam it. I was no longer angry. I was free. A black sedan pulled up to the curb, its lights off. My prepaid car service. Contingency plan executed. "Mrs. Vance?" the driver asked. "Yes," I said, breathing in the free air. "I am." I had the driver take me not to a shelter, but to the Pembroke, a luxury long-term stay hotel in the city, the kind of place designed for executives who understood discretion and walk-in showers with real safety bars. I paid for 2 weeks in cash. Contingency funds I had been pulling out $200 at a time for months. In the clean, silent suite, I took a long, hot shower, washing the smell of cheap cleaner, wine, and failure off my skin. I made myself a cup of strong, hot tea. It was 11 p.m. I looked at the cell phone. I knew my lawyer, Mr. Hassan, was an early riser. I also knew he would take this call. I dialed his private number. He picked up on the second ring, sharp and alert. "Eleanor," he said. My voice was calm, clear steel. "Hello, Mr. Hassan. It's done. They've defaulted." There was a quiet sigh on the other end. "I'm sorry to hear that, Eleanor. Are you safe?" "Perfectly safe and perfectly certain. Tonight, in front of 8 witnesses, my son and his wife publicly refused me care, accused me of malingering, and ordered me to perform manual labor while in excruciating pain." "That," Hassan said, his voice now a lawyer's cold, righteous fury, "is what we call a default of care. I will execute the clause first thing in the morning. Mr. Hassan, I want you to file the loan for the full amount against their property at 9 a.m. the second the courthouse opens. The full amount. Understood?" "Understood, Eleanor. That will be the principal of $400,000 plus the 10% accrued annual interest, $440,000 total. They will be served with the notice of intent to file lien by courier before noon." I hung up. I drank my tea. I didn't feel victorious. I felt peaceful. I had triaged the situation, cut out the infection, and saved myself. But that peace was fragile. I knew what was coming next. The silence on my side of the city was about to be broken by a wave of pure, self-centered panic. I just needed to make sure the door was permanently locked when they finally came for me. Marcus Sterling woke up late, near 11 a.m., to the throbbing drumbeat of a dual-frequency headache, cheap wine, and absolute, pure shame. The house was a monument to their failure. The living room reeked of stale wine and the sticky, chemical smell of failure. His $20,000 carpet was now a vast, sticky, pinkish-purple smear. Tiffany was already awake, pacing the kitchen like a caged predator. "I'm going to kill her," she whispered, her voice a raw croak. "She is cleaning this entire house with a toothbrush." Marcus just groaned, his head in his hands. "Let's just call a professional, Tiff. We'll cover the cost." "A professional!" she shrieked, the volume spiking his pain. "She is the professional. She's been a freeloader for a year, and the one time we ask her to pull her weight, she throws a tantrum and ruins my aesthetic. I'm done, Marcus. She has 1 week to find a state-run home." She stormed out, marching down the hall to my room, ready for war. She didn't bother to knock, slamming the door open so hard it hit the drywall. "All right, you ungrateful old—" she started, and then her words died in her throat. Marcus stumbled up behind her, bracing for the inevitable screaming match. The room was not empty, but it was aggressive in its neatness. The bed was made with tight, military corners. The closet was open, revealing a row of empty hangers. Every trace of my existence, the knickknacks, the photos, the scent of lavender lotion, was gone. It was sterile, impersonal, like a newly vacated holding cell. "Marcus!" Tiffany screamed, the anger replaced by a thin, confused note of terror. She's gone." Marcus stopped dead, staring at the emptiness, and then at the only object left, the simple, dark wooden box sitting in the exact center of the bed. "What is that?" Tiffany demanded, her suspicion shifting instantly to greedy curiosity. "Did she leave us something? A secret stash?" She lunged, snatching the box off the crisp duvet. It was heavy. She fumbled with the clasp and threw the lid open. "It's just papers," she said, disgust dripping from her voice. "Stupid old useless papers." She almost tossed the box aside, but Marcus was already trembling. He wasn't looking at the small silver locket or the lock of hair. His eyes were locked on the thick, folded, cream-colored document. He recognized the paper, the raised notary seal. It was the original. "Oh, God!" he whispered, his hands shaking violently. "No! Oh, my God, no!" Tiffany finally noticed his terror. If Marcus was terrified, it meant money. She snatched the document from his hands. "What is this? Why are you shaking? What did you do?" It's a loan agreement," Marcus stammered, his defense already collapsing. "Eleanor Vance, benefactor. Marcus Sterling, recipient." Tiffany looked up, pure confusion freezing her face. "What loan? What is $400,000? She started to read, her eyes widening, her lips silently forming the words. 0% interest, contingent upon respectful care and lodging, default of care clause. Then her voice found itself, a terrifyingly low, guttural whisper. "You told me," she said, her eyes lifting to lock onto his. "You told me that your mother gifted us that money. You told me it was your inheritance. You told me she was grateful we were letting her live here." She advanced on him, backing him out of the room and into the hallway. The thick legal paper shook in her grip. I did it for us, Tiff, baby," he pleaded, raising his hands. "It was a gift. The contract was just a formality her old lawyer made her do for tax purposes. It doesn't mean anything." "Not real," she hissed, her voice climbing back to a hysterical shriek. "It looks damn real, Marcus. It's notarized. Default of care clause. In the sole judgment of the benefactor, if a non-hostile living environment is not provided, The loan becomes immediately due in full with 10% accrued annual interest. She stopped, her mind calculating the catastrophic number. $440,000. The astronomical figure hung in the air. She looked around the hallway at the expensive wallpaper, the recessed lighting, the grand staircase, the stage set for her perfect life. This isn't our house, she whispered, her voice breaking. It's hers. We're not rich. We're tenants. We're debtors. The full, horrible realization hit her, the betrayal that cut deeper than any other. She looked at Marcus, the successful provider she had married, and saw a coward. You're poor, she choked out. You're as poor as she is. You're a freeloader. She hated him, but she hated herself more for being tricked. Her entire life, her social standing, her brand. It was all a lie built on the charity of the old woman she had just forced to clean her carpet. Tiffany's face went a sheet white, pale with a terror so profound it was almost silent. She looked like she was going to vomit. I have a job. Marcus yelled, his voice cracking, a pathetic last-ditch defense. He couldn't even name his title. She planned this. She trapped us, Tiffany shrieked, backing away. She's a director of nursing, you idiot. She's probably more competent than our entire zip code. At that exact beautifully orchestrated moment, the doorbell rang. The sharp 3-note chime cut through the air, making them both jump. They stared at each other, frozen in the hallway of their ruined life. Who is that? Tiffany whispered, panic tightening her throat. It's not the guests, Marcus mumbled, his stomach churning. He stumbled down the stairs. He opened the heavy front door. A man in a crisp courier uniform stood on the porch. Marcus Sterling? The courier asked, voice neutral. Yes. This is for you. The courier handed him a large, stiff, legal-sized envelope, had him sign a digital scanner, and was walking back to his van before Marcus could say a word. Marcus stood in the foyer, tearing the thick paper open. He pulled out the document. It was from Davis, Finch, and Hassan. Mr. Hassan. His heart ceased functioning. It was a notice of intent to file lien. It stated, in cold, brutal legalese, that Eleanor Vance had filed a default of care claim. The full itemized amount of $440,000 was due in full upon receipt, and failure to pay would result in a lien being placed on the property at 14 Willow Creek Drive, effective immediately, to be followed by a forced sale and foreclosure action within 30 days. It wasn't just old papers. The bomb had gone off. Marcus crumpled the notice in his shaking hand, the crinkle of the paper sounding like a gunshot. He was locked out of his own life. My small cell phone on the polished mahogany table of the Pembroke suite vibrated constantly. It was still ringing when I woke up. Marcus, Tiffany, Marcus again. An endless stream of demands, threats, and finally, incoherent wailing. I simply watched the names flash, sipping my jasmine tea. I did not answer. The show was playing exactly as scheduled. I knew they were not apologetic. They were trapped. They couldn't pay $440,000. The notice of intent to file lien was now a public, permanent brand of default on their financial record. They couldn't sell their house because they were already $40,000 underwater with my stake. The gilded cage had officially become a prison. At 9:07 a.m., Mr. Hassan called, his voice clipped and efficient. The documents have been filed with the county clerk. The lien is legally attached to 14 Willow Creek Drive. Now they try to fight. They will breach, I said, echoing his own prophecy. They won't use a lawyer. Marcus will try to use his status. I'm ready for him, Hassan assured me. I sent a copy of the notarized agreement and the recorded lien to his head of human resources and his corporate compliance officer. Not slander, Eleanor. Just a courtesy notification regarding a significant personal financial liability that could impact his security clearance. That should keep him busy. Profession sprinkles. A small, dark wave of satisfaction washed over me. Marcus's career was built on the shaky foundation of his perceived wealth and stability. A $440,000 personal lien was financial leprosy in that world. I dressed in a sensible navy suit, my director armor, and spent the afternoon handling the real business of my life. I called a local real estate attorney specializing in short sales. I had to sell my old paid-off bungalow to secure my retirement and pay for my hip upgrade. The original plan had been to retire in that bungalow. Marcus's greed had stolen that plan. Now, I needed the proceeds. My old house was still empty. It had been sitting there, waiting, a silent promise. I needed the sale to clear immediately. The house. I made a stop at my old city neighborhood, driving slowly past the small, well-kept bungalow. It felt alien and distant. I saw a sticker on the mailbox, a standard-issue HOA violation notice. Failure to maintain landscaping. That neighborhood was strict. I pulled out my phone and called the property manager. "I'm Eleanor Vance, the owner," I said. "I'm aware of the violation. I'm listing the house this week. I need immediate access to resolve the issue." The manager, a tight-lipped man named Mr. Klein, was all rules and rigidity. "Mrs. Vance, we have keys, but we also have a secondary lien on the property. Unpaid fees, $800 in quarterly dues and late penalties. You must settle the $800 before access is granted." This was a microclock. Pay the lien or lose valuable selling time. The cost was small. The leverage was immediate. I paid the $800 over the phone instantly, using a dedicated contingency card. The money vanished, but the door opened. "I'll meet you there in 20 minutes, I told Klein. I got the keys. I walked through the quiet, empty rooms. It smelled of dust and old memories. I went straight to the crawl space in the back utility closet. My hand reached behind a loose floorboard. I pulled out a heavy, sealed manila envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $12,500. This was the real nest egg, my emergency fund that Marcus and Tiffany never knew existed. They only saw the $400,000 tied up in their house. This was my hidden breathing room. I was counting my assets, feeling the concrete certainty of cash, when my phone rang. I saw the name, Tiffany. I answered on the third ring, my voice cool and even. "Eleanor, you vile parasitic witch. You will get that lien off our house right now." Her voice was a raw, hysterical shriek. "You are speaking to the benefactor," I replied, my voice dangerously soft. "The loan agreement is clear. You breached the default of care clause last night. You are in foreclosure, Tiffany. Call Mr. Hassan. You are a sick, cruel old woman. We'll call the police. We'll tell them you're senile. We'll get a restraining order. You can't do this." "Actually, I can," I said, enjoying the staccato exchange. "I have 8 sworn affidavits from your dinner guests documenting my mistreatment, signed this morning. I also have the original notarized contract. You signed it, Tiffany. Your husband signed it. You agreed to the terms." There was a moment of terrifying, guttural silence on the line. Then Marcus's defeated voice cut in. "Mom, please. I'll apologize. I'll clean the carpet. We'll do better. Just don't ruin my career. I'll lose my job over this." "The price of your job," I told him, closing the manila envelope, "was showing your mother respect. You defaulted on that, too. Your assets are now being liquidated to cover your debt." I hung up, silencing the frantic pleading. I felt the familiar lock in my jaw, the director's focus. I secured the $12,500 check. I had the keys to my past and the leverage for my future. I walked out the front door, locking it behind me. Just as I reached my car, an old beat-up sedan pulled up to the curb. It was Marcus, frantic, his eyes red and wild. He had tracked me using the Find My iPhone app he insisted I download for safety. He leaped out of the car. "Mom, don't go. We can talk. Give me the papers." I was already sliding into the driver's seat. "I'm not holding the papers, Marcus. You are. You signed them. The consequences are yours." He lunged for the car door handle, his hand closing over the cool metal. His face, usually so composed, was completely undone. "I'll do anything. What do you want? Just tell me the real price," he yelled, slamming his hand against the glass, the sound sharp and desperate. I looked at him, truly looked at the man I had raised. He was still trying to negotiate his way out of a debt of character. My next move had to be swift, and it had to be public. I saw a small white car approaching slowly down the street. It had a realtor's sign on the roof. I smiled, a cold, calculated expression. "You've already paid the price, Marcus," I said, putting the car in gear. I watched in my rearview mirror as he stood there, defeated, and then I saw the realtor car slow down, the young woman inside staring with wide eyes at the distraught man, screaming in front of the house for sale. Marcus had just given me my first piece of public collateral. The following morning, I met with the new attorney, Ms. Ava Sharma, who specialized in rapid turnaround real estate litigation. She was young, sharp, and understood speed. I laid out the notarized loan agreement and the freshly filed lien. "This is airtight, Eleanor," she said, tapping the contract. "The default of care clause is clear, and the public spectacle on Tuesday was the final piece of evidence. The foreclosure will proceed in 30 days unless they pay the $440,000 in full." "They won't have it," I stated. "My concern is harassment. Marcus will use his job title to apply pressure to Mr. Hassan's firm, and Tiffany will leverage her social contacts." Ms. Sharma smiled, a dangerous, no-nonsense expression. "We'll use their public image against them. I'm filing an injunction to sell, but also a motion for a temporary restraining order based on your son's attempted assault yesterday at your old home. We'll cite the $440,000 lien as the core motive for their violent behavior. It moves the conflict from a domestic issue to a high-stakes financial threat to your safety. The cost of this maneuver hit my contingency fund immediately, $2,000 in filing and service fees. Money for safety. I accepted the micro-cost without flinching. I needed to secure the sale of my old bungalow. That afternoon, I was back in the city neighborhood. I had hired a cleaning crew and a gardener to address the HOA violation. As the crew worked, the white car from yesterday, the realtor, Ms. Jenkins, pulled up. "Mrs. Vance?" she asked, looking nervously at the house and then at me. "I apologize for yesterday. That man, your son, he seemed quite agitated. Marcus is dealing with severe financial strain and lashing out," I confirmed, keeping my voice calm and professional. "The house he currently occupies is in foreclosure." Social leverage. I didn't lie. I just curated the truth. Ms. Jenkins' professional interest immediately spiked. She wasn't seeing a desperate old woman. She was seeing a motivated seller with high-value collateral. She became my ally instantly. I signed the listing agreement right there on the hood of her car. Meanwhile, Tiffany was launching her counterattack. It began with an email, copied to half their social circle, and, crucially, to the Willow Creek Homeowners Association president, a woman named Carol, who lived 2 doors down from Marcus. The subject line was, "Urgent, Family Crisis and Elder Abuse." The email was a masterpiece of gaslighting. It claimed I had suffered a sudden cognitive decline and was being manipulated by my lawyer to steal Marcus's legitimate inheritance. She claimed I was suffering from severe malingering and that the loan agreement was a forgery. I read the email in the sanctuary of my suite, my jaw locking. Tiffany had escalated to reputation. I immediately forwarded the entire thread to Miss Sharma, along with the original notarized contract and Marcus's frantic voicemail from last night. "We don't respond to the email, Eleanor," Ms. Sharma instructed. "We use it to fuel the restraining order, but the HOA? That's social friction we must manage immediately." I called Carol, the HOA president. She answered on the second ring, her voice tight with judgmental concern. "Eleanor, this is Carol. I just received Tiffany's email. It's deeply disturbing. This lien, $440,000. It's going to impact all our property values, dear. We need mediation. Marcus and Tiffany have requested an emergency review." "Carol," I said, my voice steady, "the only emergency is the failure to pay a notarized debt. I am happy to meet, but only under two conditions. First, Marcus and Tiffany must sign a statement acknowledging the debt. Second, I will be bringing my lawyer, Mr. Hassan. I am not attending a family meeting. I am attending a debt resolution meeting." The HOA meeting was set for that evening in the Grand Community Clubhouse. When I walked into the room, the contrast was sharp. Marcus and Tiffany were pale, puffy-eyed, and dressed in expensive clothes that now looked like costumes. They radiated desperate anger. Carol, the president, sat between them, a look of stiff, polite horror on her face. Mr. Hassan was beside me, a pillar of calm, cold legal strength. "The purpose of this meeting," Carol began, her voice brittle, "is to find an amicable resolution to the Eleanor Vance lien, which is threatening the stability of our community." "There is no ambiguity," Mr. Hassan cut in, sliding a copy of the notice of intent across the table. "My client, Miss Vance, is the benefactor of a personal loan agreement that has been defaulted upon due to a verifiable breach of the care clause. The amount due is $440,000. "It's a lie!" Tiffany screamed, leaping up. "She's sick. She was faking. She's trying to steal our house." I stayed calm, my eyes locked on Tiffany's frantic face. I leaned forward, my voice cutting through her hysteria. "Tiffany," I said, using the exact same tone I used when firing a cruel staff member, "the condition for the loan was a safe and non-hostile living environment. In your sole judgment, you felt it appropriate to accuse me of malingering and order me to perform manual labor while I was visibly in pain, in front of company." I paused, letting the silence ring. "Which one of your 8 guests would like to testify that I was not humiliated?" Tiffany crumbled. She looked at Carol, whose face had gone hard. The threat had flipped. Tiffany's reckless public shaming of me was now my biggest piece of social leverage. Carol shuffled her papers, her voice now flat. "Mr. Sterling, Mrs. Sterling, the HOA cannot intervene in a notarized personal financial matter. We urge you to satisfy the debt within the 30-day window to avoid foreclosure, as this affects property values." I had won the social battle. Tiffany's attempt to use the HOA as a shield had only resulted in her community officially siding with my claim. The consequences were mounting. I stood up, leaving the notice of intent on the table. "I trust the lien and the pending restraining order will clarify the reality of the situation for both of you." As I walked out, I heard Tiffany launch into a fresh wave of vitriol directed at Marcus. He was standing there, defeated, his face the color of wet ash. I got in my car. I checked my phone. I had a notification. Ms. Sharma has filed the temporary restraining order. As I pulled out of the clubhouse driveway, I saw a heavy-duty truck parked outside 14 Willow Creek Drive. 2 men were hammering a large white sign into the manicured front lawn. right beside Tiffany's prize rose bushes. The sign was black and red, unavoidable. Foreclosure sale pending. Inquire with Davis, Finch, and Hassan. The foreclosure sale pending sign was a physical wound on Tiffany's carefully constructed world. It was a beacon of their ruin, advertising their failure to every neighbor, every guest, every socialite in the Willow Creek community. The next 24 hours were a predictable maelstrom of screaming voicemails and blocked numbers. Marcus had lost his primary leverage, his reputation. Tiffany had lost her social standing. All that was left was desperation. The house was scheduled for 2 viewings that afternoon. Ms. Sharma had secured the temporary restraining order, which prevented Marcus and Tiffany from approaching me or my properties, including my old bungalow, and crucially, prohibited them from interfering with the house sale or showing. The court order was clear. Any documented interference would result in immediate eviction, but desperation breeds criminal ingenuity. I drove out to Willow Creek, parking discreetly down the street in a borrowed, unremarkable sedan. I wanted to observe. The first viewing was set for 3 p.m. A clean-cut couple arrived in a Lexus, their faces alight with the hope of a luxury purchase. I watched as Marcus opened the door. He was pale and shaking, but tried to plaster on the successful man's smile. Tiffany was nowhere to be seen. The couple went inside. 5 minutes later, they burst out, their faces twisted in confusion and disgust. The woman was clutching her stomach. The man looked furious. They scrambled into their Lexus and sped away. I knew this wasn't Marcus's doing. He was too cowardly for direct confrontation. This was Tiffany. I waited for the second viewing at 4:30 p.m. This time it was a single older woman, impeccably dressed. She rang the bell, and Marcus opened the door. The moment she stepped inside, I saw Tiffany, perched by the second-story window, a pale, malicious specter. The buyer came out after 10 minutes, walking quickly to her car. She looked shaken. I pulled out my phone and called Ms. Sharma. "They are sabotaging the viewings. I need proof. The current order is not strong enough." "How are they doing it?" Mrs. Sharma asked. "I didn't see, but the first couple looked sick." The woman was clutching her stomach. Mrs. Sharma didn't hesitate. "I'm sending a professional investigator disguised as a third buyer. They'll get the proof we need for an immediate eviction." The investigator, a sharp-eyed man named Mr. Lee, arrived an hour later. I watched as he approached the front door of 14 Willow Creek. Marcus looked exhausted and defeated when he answered. Mr. Lee was inside for barely 7 minutes. When he came out, he walked straight to my car, slid into the passenger seat, and handed me a small micro-recorder. "They're using their house against the buyers, Eleanor," he said, his face grim. "Tiffany, the daughter-in-law, is hiding in the master bathroom. She's running the water and opening a small vial of something called butyric acid. It smells exactly like rank, aged vomit. It is not harmful, but it's overwhelming. She then closes the window and runs the air conditioning on high. It creates a localized, non-traceable odor that contaminates the air system briefly." He played the recording. You could hear Marcus's muffled sales pitch, then a sudden, sickening gagging sound, followed by the buyer saying, "It smells like a sewage backup. I can't breathe." "That's illegal interference with a court-ordered sale," Miss Sharma said when I patched her into the call. "That's enough for an immediate writ of possession. We move now." I had the proof. We were moving from financial jeopardy to physical eviction. The consequence was immediate. Ms. Sharma filed the writ, securing a hearing for the next morning. The judge would grant the writ of possession, and the sheriff would arrive to change the locks within 48 hours. The micro clock was ticking. 48 hours until Tiffany and Marcus were physically thrown out. I felt a surge of adrenaline, but also a deep weariness. This relentless, petty battle was exhausting. I was a director of nursing, not a private investigator. I needed to focus on securing my future. I needed to sell my old bungalow. I called Miss Jenkin, the realtor. We have an interested buyer, cash offer, $50,000 above asking. They want a quick closing. Is there anything else about the house that could slow us down? Any old records? Anything I might have missed? Just the usual things, she replied. We need all original utility transfer papers, the old deed, and… Wait, there's a note here from the county. Something about a storage unit registered to the address. It says, Account 402B, active, priority access. Do not attempt to close without owner's signature on associated account. A storage unit. I frowned. My late husband, Robert, had leased a storage unit years ago for old furniture when Marcus went to college, but I was certain I had closed it out years ago. Why would it still be listed as active and priority access? I hung up, a cold knot forming in my stomach. Was there something Robert had kept from me? Something Marcus knew about? Marcus, desperate, frantic, and now facing homelessness, might know that this storage unit existed. This could be his final play. The storage unit was a new vulnerability, an unknown variable in my perfectly managed exit. I needed to see what was in that box before Marcus got there. I grabbed my keys. I was going to Storage Depot 402B, but Marcus was already there. I was sure of it. I pulled up to the gate of the massive, ugly complex on the edge of the industrial park. The gate was closed. I swiped my key card, the one I found tucked in the manila envelope with the $2,500 cashier's check. The gate slid open. I drove toward the back and saw it. A small, beat-up, dark blue truck with rust spots parked awkwardly right in front of my unit, 402B. The engine was running, and standing next to the open, darkened unit, fumbling with a bulky old lockbox, was Marcus. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine across the concrete drive. His face registered surprise, then pure, predatory desperation. He had beaten me to the key. He knew something was in there. And now, he knew I knew too. I slammed on the brakes. My heart was pounding. This wasn't about the house anymore. This was a race for the last piece of the inheritance. He dropped the lockbox and began to run toward me. I gripped the steering wheel, not knowing if he was coming for the keys or for me. The air went thick with dust and the smell of hot, oiled concrete. I heard the sound of the truck engine roar as Marcus put it in reverse, cutting me off. I was trapped between the locked gate and my desperate, dangerous son. I was trapped. Marcus's old, beat-up truck roared in reverse, cutting off my exit path toward the main gate. The air was thick with dust and the smell of hot oil and concrete. This wasn't a legal battle anymore. It was a physical showdown over the last unknown asset. He slammed the truck into park and leaped out, his face twisted with predatory desperation. He moved like a trapped animal, not the successful executive he pretended to be. "The key card!" he yelled, running toward my car. "You shouldn't have come here, Mom. Give me the keys." He reached my door handle, but I was faster. I hit the automatic locks with a sharp thunk. He rattled the handle, his knuckles white, his eyes red and wild. "Stop it, Marcus," I commanded, my voice flat steel, amplified by the closed glass. "You are violating a temporary restraining order. I will call the police right now. Your career is hanging by a thread, and you want to commit assault?" He froze, his frantic energy hitting the cold wall of legality. The word restraining order was like a tiny pinprick of sanity in his panic. He backed off a step, breathing hard, looking around the desolate industrial lot. He knew I wouldn't bluff. "It's mine," he spat, pointing back at Unit 402B. "Dad told me about it. The bonds, the stock certificates. You were supposed to give it to me when I turned 40. The twist? Robert, My late husband had kept a secret asset, but Marcus had the facts wrong. He thought it was a gift. Robert was always a cautious, planning man. I rolled the window down a quarter inch. Your father left me the account, not you. He made me the sole signatory, and I need those documents now to complete the sale of the bungalow. You are interfering with a court-sanctioned real estate transaction. He trusted me, Marcus shrieked. He knew you'd leave me nothing. That money is the only thing that can save the house. The only thing that can save the house is character, Marcus, and you defaulted on that too. He knew he couldn't break the glass, but he also knew he couldn't let me leave with the contents. He ran back to the unit, fumbling with the heavy, dark steel door that stood ajar. The lockbox lay on the concrete floor. This was my chance. I checked my rearview mirror. No other cars. I threw the sedan into reverse and backed up just enough to angle around his truck, tires squealing softly on the dusty concrete. Stay away from that unit, I yelled, pulling past the truck. He looked up, realizing I was escaping. He made a desperate lunge for the unit's door, trying to block my access. I parked the car sideways, blocking the narrow path between the two rows of units. I stepped out, my posture straight, ignoring the deep ache in my hip. I strode to the open unit door. The smell inside was metallic and stale, like old documents and cheap cardboard. Marcus was panting, standing over the lockbox, his hands hovering over the latch. If you take this, I lose everything. I'm begging you, Mom. I looked down at the lockbox. It was a bulky military green model, exactly the kind Robert used for important papers. You already lost everything when you ordered your sick mother to clean a carpet for sport, I said, my voice empty of warmth. Move. He was big, 40 years old, and desperate. I was 68, recovering from surgery, but I was also Eleanor Vance, and I understood leverage. I pulled out my phone. I am calling the non-emergency line. I'm reporting that a party under a restraining order is attempting to physically assault me and confiscate documents critical to a court-ordered sale. Do you want the police here, Marcus? Do you want to explain to your head of compliance why you are being fingerprinted on a felony at a storage unit? He was sweating profusely. He knew the risk. A felony charge meant his job was gone by midnight. The $440,000 lien would look like a minor inconvenience. He backed up one reluctant step, his fists clenched, his eyes burning with hatred. You think you've won? You think this is the end? I didn't answer. I knelt, a difficult, painful maneuver that felt like shards of glass in my joint, and grabbed the lockbox. It was heavy, far heavier than necessary for documents. I stood up, cradling the box against my chest. As I turned to walk away, Marcus moved, not toward me, but toward my car. He grabbed my bag sitting on the passenger seat and ripped it open. He didn't take the phone or the cash. He found the key card to the storage facility. You're not coming back in, old woman, he sneered, holding up the plastic card, his single, small victory. He snapped it in half, tossing the pieces into the dust. I'm staying here. I'm cleaning out this unit. He had blocked my re-entry, but I had the prize. I walked back to my car, the lockbox heavy and cold in my arms. I felt a pang of profound sorrow. This was my son, a thief, a liar, and now a trespasser. I drove straight out the emergency exit, ignoring the loud, screeching alarm that rang as I passed. I drove away from the industrial park, leaving Marcus standing alone, surrounded by the smell of dust and defeat. The lockbox was secured, but I knew Marcus wouldn't leave that unit. He would stake it out, waiting for a chance to retrieve the rest. The true contents of Robert's legacy were still unknown. I met Mr. Hassan in his office, the lockbox sitting on the massive mahogany table between us. I recounted the confrontation, my hands still faintly shaking from the adrenaline of the physical threat. He is desperate, Eleanor, Hassan said, his jaw tight. We need to move the writ of possession hearing up. I've added the butyric acid evidence and the attempted assault at the storage unit to the motion. I unlocked the box with the small, aged key I carried on my keychain. The contents were wrapped in heavy cellophane, protected against time and moisture. The first thing I pulled out wasn't money, but a dense stack of papers, original stock certificates and zero-coupon bonds. They were from the 1990s, obscure companies that Robert had invested in quietly for decades. Hassan's eyes widened as he scanned the denominations. Eleanor, these companies performed. They haven't been touched since they were purchased. The capital gains are substantial. More than enough to buy the Willow Creek house outright, if you wanted it. I shook my head. I want my clean retirement. The total of this portfolio is for my security, not their debt. This is Robert's final act of care, protecting me from exactly this outcome. We focused on the final document, a single sheet of heavy parchment, signed and dated just a month before Robert's death. It was a formal codicil to his will, a quiet, devastating message meant only for me. The codicil stated that Marcus's father knew he was incapable of handling his full inheritance. It created a special irrevocable trust, naming me, Eleanor Vance, as the sole trustee and lifetime beneficiary. The documents in the box represented the corpus of that trust. The core lie I believed, that my son was capable, was the lie Robert had recognized and neutralized. He wasn't trusting Marcus to be responsible, I whispered, realizing the depth of my late husband's foresight. He was protecting the assets from Marcus. This was the final piece of the financial security puzzle. The debt to Marcus and Tiffany was now merely punitive, a matter of principle, not need. The next morning, we were in court for the writ of possession hearing. The courthouse smelled of old paper and anxiety. Marcus and Tiffany arrived with a junior lawyer, a nervous young man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Tiffany was wearing a perfect, expensive suit, trying to project innocence. She was launching her final public attack, the unreliable witness twist. "Your Honor," her lawyer stammered, "we request this entire lien and restraining order be dismissed. Ms. Vance is suffering from significant cognitive decline, as evidenced by this email from the HOA president, Carol, describing her erratic behavior and her sudden false claims of abuse. My clients are deeply concerned for her mental health." Tiffany looked directly at the judge, forcing tears. "She has isolated herself, Your Honor. She is being manipulated by Mr. Hassan. She thinks we're trying to harm her." Mr. Hassan stood up, calm and towering. "Your Honor, my client is a retired director of nursing with 40 years of executive experience. Her cognitive function is unimpaired. We submit Exhibit A, the recording provided by our investigator, documenting Mrs. Sterling's malicious, calculated attempt to sabotage the court-ordered sale of the property by contaminating the air with butyric acid, a non-toxic but overwhelming irritant." He played the recording. The courtroom went silent, listening to the muffled retching sounds and the buyer's panicked accusation of a sewage backup. Tiffany's face drained of color. Then, Mr. Hassan continued, "We submit Exhibit B, the notarized affidavit from the Willow Creek HOA president, Carol, stating that Ms. Vance is welcome at all community functions and confirming that Ms. Vance's financial claim is considered legitimate and a threat to property values, not a threat to my clients." Tiffany had used the HOA president in her initial email, but that ally had flipped. Her gaslighting effort had backfired, becoming my strongest social proof. The judge leaned over the bench, his expression severe. "Mr. Sterling," he said, his voice hard, "we have evidence that you, a party subject to a temporary restraining order, attempted physical interference with the benefactor's property at a storage facility yesterday. Do you deny this? Marcus stood up, trembling. She was stealing family property, Your Honor. My father. The property, the judge cut in, was secured by the sole trustee, your mother, under a valid codicil. Your actions constitute a violation of the TRO and a direct threat to Ms. Vance. Your attempt to claim your mother is incompetent while actively using criminal means to interfere with a sale suggests financial desperation, not concern. The judge didn't hesitate. He granted the writ of possession immediately. The writ is executed, effective at noon tomorrow, the judge declared, striking his gavel. The Sterling family must vacate the property at 14 Willow Creek Drive. The sheriff's department will escort them and change the locks. You have been found in contempt of this court, Mr. Sterling. Any further attempts to interfere with the benefactor's person or property will result in immediate incarceration. We had won the house. I had won my freedom. But Marcus was still out there, defeated, desperate, and potentially dangerous. As we walked out, Miss Sharma clutched my arm. We won the house, Eleanor, but they know you have the storage box. Marcus is still watching. I just got a call from the sheriff's department. Tiffany made a direct threat to destroy the property before noon tomorrow. She specifically mentioned the custom $20,000 Sub-Zero refrigerator. I stopped dead. Destroying the fridge wouldn't hurt me. It would lower the sale price of the house I was about to seize. This was pure vindictive malice, a petty attack on the physical symbol of her failed status. I need to be there before noon, I told Miss Sharma. I had to face the final, spiteful tantrum of my daughter-in-law. I needed to ensure my final asset was not damaged. I arrived at 14 Willow Creek Drive at 11 a.m., an hour before the sheriff's deadline. I pulled up in my rental car, the large black and red foreclosure sale pending sign acting as a grim welcome. Miss Sharma had arranged for 2 security personnel to stand by at the curb, but I needed to go inside alone. The front door was slightly ajar, which was unusual. A thick, sweet, synthetic odor wafted out, cinnamon and clove, covering something acrid. Tiffany's final attempt at domestic perfume. I walked into the foyer. The house was stripped of all personality, but not of rage. Boxes were stacked haphazardly near the door, poorly taped and labeled. The living room was empty, the pink stain on the beige carpet still visible, now just a pathetic smear of failure. I walked to the kitchen, bracing myself for the fight. Marcus was nowhere to be seen. He had cut his losses and fled. Only Tiffany remained, clinging to the wreckage of her kingdom. She was standing next to the Sub-Zero refrigerator, the custom stainless steel shining dully under the recessed lights. She held a hammer in her hand. "Eleanor," she hissed, turning to face me. Her eyes were sunken, her face pale and streaked with dried tears. She looked less like a pampered hostess and more like a ruined street fighter. "You won the house. You won the damn money. But you are not taking the fridge." I walked toward her, slowly, deliberately, as I had once walked toward a screaming, drunk patient in the hospital ward. I didn't rush. I didn't threaten. "The refrigerator is a fixture, Tiffany. It is part of the property I am seizing to cover your debt of $440,000, I explained, my voice low and steady. "Damaging it is vandalism, which is a criminal offense." "Criminal? What do I care? I'm ruined," she screamed, raising the hammer above her head. "You did this. You and your sick lawyer." "No, Tiffany," I said, looking her straight in the eye. "Marcus did this, and you helped him. You gave 8 witnesses the evidence of your cruelty. You filed a false elder abuse claim. You gassed potential buyers. And now you want to go to jail over a refrigerator?" She hesitated. the hammer frozen mid-swing. She was still rational enough to fear the sheriff and the jail cell. I took one more step, invading her personal space. "I know what's in the storage unit, Tiffany," I said, delivering the final crushing blow. "I know about Robert's trust. Not only are you losing this house, but you and Marcus are cut out of the family legacy forever. You destroyed his mother's health and dignity for a house you never owned. And now, the true family fortune, which is 20 times the value of this house, will be used to fund my retirement, not your luxury aesthetic." The revelation hit her like a physical shock. Her eyes widened, focusing on a disaster larger than the current foreclosure. The hand holding the hammer dropped slowly to her side. "Trust?" she whispered, the word hollow. "There's more?" "There's everything," I confirmed. "And you get nothing." She looked at the hammer, then at the shiny fridge, and finally at me. Her face crumpled, not with sadness, but with the total realization of her failure. The venom was replaced by pathetic, choking sobs. She didn't throw the hammer. She just let it clatter to the granite floor, the sound sharp and final. "Get out, Eleanor," she choked out, turning her back to me. "Just get out." I didn't leave. I checked the fridge, opening the doors one by one. She hadn't damaged it. Her malice had been neutralized by the clarity of her total loss. I was no longer fighting an entitled daughter-in-law. I was supervising a breakdown. I walked to the front window. A black and white patrol car was pulling up to the curb, followed by Mr. Hassan and a tow truck. The sheriff was on time. I opened the front door, stepping onto the marble foyer. The sheriff, a tall, imposing woman, held the writ of possession. "Marcus Sterling and Tiffany Sterling?" the sheriff asked, her voice stern. "They are inside," I confirmed. "The property is vacant save for some personal items. No resistance." The sheriff walked into the house. I waited on the porch, watching the scene unfold. A few neighbors, including Carol, the HOA president, stood on their lawns, pretending to water plants, but watching every detail. The sheriff led a sobbing, distraught Tiffany out the front door. Marcus was already in his truck, parked down the street, waiting to collect her, his head low in defeat. Tiffany was walked past me, still weeping, stripped of her composure and her entire life. She looked at me one last time, and I saw a strange flicker, not hate, but a terrible self-inflicted recognition. She said nothing. I watched them drive away, Marcus's truck slowly pulling out of the Willow Creek community. The tow truck was now backing up to remove the foreclosure sign. The house was silent. I looked down at the key in my hand, the key to the main lock, now mine. The physical threat was over, the debt was collected, and the house was secured. I had won every single battle. But the victory felt cold, like the steel of the sub-zero fridge. 2 weeks later, the Willow Creek house sold. The forced sale, coupled with Marcus and Tiffany's ruined credit, meant the house went for less than its inflated market value, but the proceeds were clean. The $440,000 debt was satisfied, and the remaining funds went to cover the fees and back taxes. Marcus and Tiffany walked away with zero equity, a mountain of debt, and a ruined reputation. They were left financially bankrupt, exactly as I had declared them to be. My old paid-off bungalow, thanks to Miss Jenkins' fast work, sold for $50,000 over asking price, a cash offer that closed the following day. That money, combined with the $2,500 contingency fund and the substantial portfolio of Robert's trust, secured my future completely. I was not just solvent, I was financially powerful. I remained at the Pembroke, a temporary assignment that had become permanent. My hip was still aching, but the pain no longer felt like a weapon. It felt like a scar. I finally scheduled the upgrade surgery Marcus had refused to pay for. The night before the operation, I sat in my suite, a small, worn photograph in my hand. It was Robert, my husband, smiling from 20 years ago. I looked at the picture and at the documents from the storage unit, the carefully preserved stock certificates, the notarized codicil. Robert hadn't been naive. He had seen Marcus's weakness long before I did. He hadn't given up on his son, but he had prepared for the worst case, shielding me with the one thing Marcus truly coveted: money. The trust, the secret fund, the meticulous documentation. It was all his final, quiet act of protection. "You saw it, didn't you, Robert?" I whispered to the photo. "You knew I'd have to fight him. Thank you for giving me the director's tools." The next morning, I checked into the hospital. The new hip joint was a top-of-the-line model, installed by a surgeon I trusted. It was the physical symbol of my new freedom, a body finally reflecting the strength of my will. When I was discharged, I went back to the Pembroke. The pain was receding, replaced by a slow, steady strength. I finally felt peace, but it was a quiet, bittersweet kind of peace. I had triaged the situation, cut out the infection, and saved myself. The cost had been the son I thought I had raised. I am Eleanor Vance, the director. I am the benefactor. I learned that kindness without clarity is a liability, and that the greatest act of love is sometimes documenting the truth. I put away the photograph. I walked across the clean, soundless carpet of my suite, my new hip smooth and silent. I went to the window, looking out over the city I had once been afraid to enter. My plans were not small anymore. They involved travel, charity work, and a level of independence I hadn't allowed myself in 50 years. The past was a closed ledger. The debt was settled. I was strong, financially secure, and finally, truly free. I reached for my jacket. I was going for a walk. The director had signed her final discharge papers, and she was stepping out into the sunlight. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you are here.